Every day, we are learning more about our changing world. Every day, ideas are born, challenges become opportunities. To achieve our purpose, we need people who can turn ideas into reality, who can create success. That's us at ABB. Thinkers, engineers, scientists, innovators. We push the boundaries of technology to make industry safer, more intelligent, and more productive.
Hi, welcome. I'm Terry Heymann with the World Gold Council and delighted to be here participating in IMARC. Very sorry we're not here in person, but great to have the opportunity to connect. With me today are Randy Smallwood, the CEO of Wheaton Precious Metals and also chair of the World Gold Council, and Tony Makuch, CEO of Kirkland Lake Gold. And we're going to be talking around the role that gold mining can play in contributing towards the Sustainable Development Goals, responsible mining, ESG investing, and everything that really seems to be getting a lot of focus this year in particular about how the gold mining industry, as indeed all industries, contribute meaningfully in what's been a very challenging year. Maybe Tony, we can get started with you. The World Gold Council recently put out a report looking at the contribution that the gold mining sector makes as it relates to these UN Sustainable Development Goals, and looking across the member companies saw that the gold industry contributes to almost all of the 17 SDGs. Wanted to get your thoughts on, I guess, what Kirkland Lake is doing, but also generally, does the industry do enough to set out its case about the positive contribution it makes?
I like to think that that communities where mining companies are better off that the mining company is there, and in a number of areas. First, we create a lot of direct and indirect jobs, and a lot of times these are in areas where employment has been lacking for quite some time. And because you create jobs, and these are high-paying jobs and well-trained jobs, and not that require skills, and because of that, we improve the economic conditions in the communities that we're at. We operate, and so both directly and indirectly we achieve a lot of the social, the SDG goals. I remember starting a mine in Winnemucca, out of Winnemucca, Nevada. Winnemucca, Nevada at the time was actually there was high unemployment, and the mine where we built the Midas mine, took you almost 2 hours to drive to the mine. A year later, we're there. The roads are fixed up. It's an hour and a quarter to get to the mine. There's over 550 people working there. We're busing people in, so we're not trying to we're trying to help the local ranchers and in terms of what they do. There's the town of Midas has drinking water. The community of Winnemucca is growing. Similarly, I can go to in the early 2000s when we developed and restarted mining out of Sudbury at Levack. Back then, again, 2003, nickel prices were down, below $3 a pound. A lot of unemployment in the Sudbury region. We started the mines at Levack. I mean, at the time when we were starting, I knew what we were going to do. You could have bought the whole town of Levack, Ontario, for less than $1 million. You could have bought all the houses. And what happened there? 2 years later, again, 500, 600 people working. We created a business generating over $200 million into the local economy, and really building sustainability for people. And these operations are still going, or these areas are still prospering from it. And with that, we don't just employ the people, but because of people, we look to try to get our people locally. I mean, we got to invest back in the communities. We invest back in the communities both for into the hospitals, into supporting local community, and things such as whether it's sports facilities, whether it's recreation facilities or parks or things for children, and we invest in food banks, we invest in education, we invest in all these areas. So I think there's a lot of positives that come from mining into these areas.
Agree with that, and this report that we put out really showcases that and talks to those impacts that you've talked about across so many different dimensions. Randy, I'm interested in your perspective, and particularly running a royalty and streaming company, a lot of the positive impact you have is also through your partner mines and your partner operations. How do you see this, and how do you see the I guess the role that the industry as a whole can play in helping communicate these positive impacts that Tony's just been talking to?
Well, Terry, to be honest, we as an industry have an incredible opportunity here, and Tony just highlighted it. To be able to improve the standard of living in rural locations. This industry tends to be focused in very rural locations, and there's not a lot of the other industries out there that don't, put increasing pressure on population centers to having people moving into population centers, and it's the standard of living that we can dramatically improve in these rural locations, and improving education, including improving healthcare, community, all the way across the board. It's we have such a great opportunity in this industry, and so I really do think that's something that we need to highlight, to bring out more, to make sure that the world understands a lot of the benefits that come from building these mines in remote locations. I can tell you, I come from the mining industry. Before I went into the streaming industry, operated mines, and I understand how important it is to have strong social license and make sure that we leave long-term sustainable benefits in these communities with our neighbors, with our friends in these communities where we operate. And so the mining industry, I think, does it better than any other. It's probably some of the highest paying jobs, but it's the spillover effects, it's the benefits that we have. Here at Wheaton, obviously a streaming company, we don't operate mines, but we have strong operating partnerships. And I think that's one of the things that we as an industry have to focus on, is building up those strong partnerships. There's many stakeholders in this equation. And when it comes to extracting minerals from a deposit, wherever it be in this world, we should make sure that everyone that benefits from that, not just the operating company, not just the workers, but the communities, the equipment suppliers, everyone contributes, and everyone that's getting a benefit from that mining operation should make sure that they put something back into the ground. And actually we do, as an industry, we do. At Wheaton, we have a very strong CSR program where we work with our partners to try and expand their own capabilities, side by side, looking for opportunities and help fund them as they manage strengthening their own social license and delivering long-term benefits to these communities. And the net effect of all of these sustainable development goals is to improve the standard of living. And I can assure you that in mines around the world, especially the member companies of the World Gold Council, we are delivering that.
Around the communities and the mine sites, that is understood, the impact that responsible mining can have. And I think, as you just said, for the industry to make that case more broadly, and particularly for investors to understand that this is an important part of how people at the top of mining companies think about their impact and the development potential of the sector. But obviously that does rely on operating responsibly and a commitment to responsible mining. And a year ago, the World Gold Council put out the Responsible Gold Mining Principles, this overarching framework that really brings together in one place all of those issues that could be considered material as it relates to environmental, social, and governance aspects. Went through a very broad and extensive consultation process, and I think it's been very well received. Randy, what do you hope this framework achieves?
Well, consistency and transparency. I mean, what it comes down to is investors need, there's an increasing demand for provenance and for origin to come into play when investors and end users are using products around the world. And so we, as an industry, have to get better at making sure that we can deliver that confidence down to those ultimate end users of our products. It's just a natural progression of society, and it's an important progression. It's an important step moving forward. And having some consistent standards where all the members of the World Gold Council have committed to at least, and I always say at least, maintaining these standards. Our objectives, all of our objectives, are to do as good a job as we can on this front. We have some minimum standards that have now been set across. And what it does is it gives confidence to investors, to consumers about the standards that have been applied. And so being able to deliver that back to those to those end users is probably the most important thing. It comes down to confidence about the quality of the project, of the product that we are producing. It also gives us standards that can be applied, across a number of different investment mechanisms. Even we, as a streaming company, can use it as a template to measure performance in terms of how companies have achieved their goals or have strived for their goals. And if there's areas that we can help, I mean, as a streaming company, we always try and become a change agent in situations like this, where we try and deliver extra value beyond our upfront payment when we acquire a streaming contract. We're always looking for ways that we can deliver that extra value. And having these standards gives us metrics that we can actually compare across the board and see where we can see particular strengths or particular weaknesses that we can focus on.
One of the justifications and rationales for putting these principles together is around providers of capital and helping them have confidence that the operations that they're investing in know what responsible means, and that it supports that capital formation process. Tony, your thoughts and maybe if you can, a little bit on some of the experiences you've had around ensuring that your operations are following these and I know other responsible mining practices that you've got in place.
With the ESG becoming a separate and distinct area of reporting, a big question for us always is, how do we effectively roll up everything we do into a reporting framework that meets the expectations of people and key stakeholders, right? You can use an example. Actually, if go an example, and something, originally a lot of this was led by the World Gold Council before in terms of financial reporting and financial reporting standards, and whether it's all in sustaining costs but our cash costs. And we see a lot of things happening here over time with responsible gold mining principles, as Randy mentioned, creating a framework where not only do we establish some guidelines or communicate things of how we really want to work and how it's important for us to work, but also have a way for we can consistently be measured against those guidelines. And in terms of some of the other things within Kirkland Lake Gold, and when you read through the responsible gold mining principles, when I first seen them introduced, you looked and said, there's nothing there that we don't do. There's nothing there that we don't want to do, and it's all about us more so not necessarily working towards complying with them, because we believe we comply and work with it. It's how we set up our communications process, how we ensure that what we're doing is communicated to the industry, and not just the investors, but to the communities we work in, to the people that work for us, and to our other industry peers.
And I hear that from quite a lot of people, that essentially companies are complying, but it's how they demonstrate that, how they show that, including to auditors and assurance providers, because it is a requirement for implementing companies that they do get this external assurance, and that in itself is a process that is new. It's been a year since the principles were launched, and companies are going on that journey. And I should just be clear that although the responsible gold mining principles were very much led by the members of the World Gold Council, they are open and in use for everybody, and we certainly encourage all gold mining companies to adopt them. And Tony, like you talk about the all-in costs, all-in sustaining costs, how that quite quickly became consistently applied across the sector, very much hope to see the same with these principles. Talking on a specific area about responsible mining, and indeed an area that's got a lot of investor interest, is climate change, and what the gold mining sector is doing to decarbonize, and indeed how to think about gold in the context of climate change more broadly. Tony, I know Kirkland's done quite a lot in this area. Do you want to speak a little bit to that?
For us, I mean, a big part of what we've been focusing on, and you can talk about it in relation to climate change, but it's also in trying to create a safer, a better work environment for our people. We invested fairly heavily, and we're industry leaders in the development of underground electrification of underground haul trucks, and we brought in the first 40-ton underground haul trucks. We have 4 of them in operation, like a 5th coming in operation at our Macassa mine in Kirkland Lake. Prior to that, we operated about 8 20-ton trucks. These are the initial trucks. All are, these are all prototypes we've been working at, and this develops the main part of our production. There's been significant investment in that. We've also, our loaders, we've also invested in battery powered loaders, and and in investing in this, you're not just investing in the piece of equipment, but you got to understand how batteries work, understand the safety, performance. You got to understand how it's going to transform parts of the industry, because it does affect the workforce. It does affect people. You need different types of mechanics. You need different kind of people to work, and the training and development that goes with that. And with that, from a climate change point of view, or from a greenhouse gas point of view, in terms of the Macassa mine in Kirkland Lake, it's probably the lowest GHG emitter in not only in our industry, or definitely I would say maybe in our industry, but I think in the mining industry as a whole. And going forward, as we work on other areas, when we look at the use of energy in our mines, and this is at Macassa Deep Underground Mine. We're spending time now at our Detour Lake mine. What can we do differently, and what in terms of how we haul ore, how we move ore from there to the mill, what we do at Fosterville, and how we run deep ramp mining in Australia. We're putting a lot of effort into this. The company's financially very strong. We're in a very strong gold price environment, and because we're purposely setting aside a significant amount of funds to reinvest into these areas, in terms of how do we change what we do in the industry in order to improve fundamentally the conditions for the people that work for us, number one. Second, for the people that live around us in the communities that we are, and then overall in the regions that we work.
The point you make around this isn't just about decarbonizing, it's about improving working conditions, it's about improving the environment for communities, and generally thinking about health and safety considerations, I think is really important, because it means it's sustaining. The mining community has really stepped up, and I think members of the World Gold Council have really stepped up. What do you think that teaches us in terms of, I guess, what the mining community has to offer in challenging times, and indeed in, as you talked about earlier, the ability to be a force or a change for good in some of these rural communities?
A lot of our operations are in remote locations, and I can tell you the immediate benefit of any type of a mining operation is higher standards with respect to healthcare in a lot of these remote locations. And so having the infrastructure there in the first place to be able to manage something like this pandemic that is I would say decimated so much of the world this year, and we still haven't seen the end effect of this. When I sit and look at the empty storefronts here in Vancouver, and think about us as being probably one of the not as badly impacted as so many other places around the world, but the impact here, there has been a seriously negative impact on this, and we haven't seen the worst of it by any means yet. But the mining industry, I do think, has actually operated relatively well in this, in terms of, first off, having the infrastructure in place to be able to manage the risk in these remote locations. We do have a benefit in terms of a lot of these locations being able to have that infrastructure in place to sort of monitor and actually control traffic and transient travel through these operations, and put in systems in place where we can minimize contact and minimize risk through physical distancing efforts and stuff like that. There has been a lot of costs to the industry. We see it in our own portfolio. The underground operations seem to suffer more because of the extra efforts in order to minimize risk, being able to get people to the work face, and trying to maintain production levels. It has had an impact on the industry. However, again, we are finding our way to manage through this. And so at Wheaton, one of the first things we did was kicked off at a unique fund, even over and above our normal CSR contributions, where we created a $5 million community support and response fund, which is designed to just provide additional support to the front lines in terms of managing this. And to date, we've already put to work over $3 million. And really, it's to programs like down in Brazil, where we supported a local group of women in a mask making enterprise to start making masks to supply to local communities and industry in that area in Brazil. Improving health facilities, providing some support to food banks. This is what's required. I mean, in times like this, I don't think there's ever been, we as an industry, we've actually survived this relatively well, especially on a relative basis. And so if there's ever a need for times of charity, this is the time where we should be giving back even a little bit more to those communities and those neighbors, especially the ones that are so heavily impacted by this pandemic. And so the industry, I'm proud of the record that we as an industry have in terms of contributing back towards managing this risk. We still have some work to do. We can see that around the world right now. We're not finished this yet, but I can assure you that we're even more well equipped than we were 9 months ago when this really first became a global issue. And I know we'll get through this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it has highlighted, and as you say, particularly in those remote locations, the important role that the mining industry does play, and really the contribution to society, and the philanthropic efforts really speak to recognizing that the mining communities have a role to play in supporting the overall livelihood of the communities where they are based, and that goes beyond the mining operations themselves. Tony, do you want to share your perspectives, and also looking to the future, how you think this might impact the industry?
There's been a huge effort to work together. And one of the big things I've really seen a change and a change in attitude in the health is among the workforce. A much more awareness in protecting the health and safety, and a little bit more attentiveness. So I think that there's a lot of positives coming out of that, and not just health and safety in the workers and health and safety in the workplace, but also into the communities and with the family. So we've been working on these things for a number of years in terms of behavior and attitude. And somehow there's been some positive of the pandemic working towards that, and we see that working into the future. I mean, from our perspective, some of the other things that this has really brought to the forefront for us is the looking at taking advantage of technology, more digitization, a lot more automation in what we do. Again, part of it is in terms of working to improve processes, improve working conditions at our operations, and which somehow exacerbated the things that we learned based on coming out of the pandemic and how people work together. Things like social distancing, things that how we have people working in offices, or how we have people just dealing with things on a day-to-day in our minds. I think things have gone a lot better. Things such as sanitization, health and hygiene. Occupational health hygiene is always a big thing. We see a lot much more awareness of that. Food safety in the workplace, and specifically in our camp jobs, such as we have at Detour. But on the community side, and for us, we've always been involved pretty heavily in our communities and supporting a lot of what Randy mentioned. What we've seen more now is it's going to set us up that we can see that we can have a much more a much more focused impact. We spent some time talking to the leaders of a lot of the local communities where we work, the mayors, the elected officials, and sort of come up with what are the areas that they see, and again, it's things like food safety, homelessness, addiction, mental health, big areas that we're looking at, senior care, and then a big part is youth employment, youth training and development, and things like equality and diversity. How do we bring communities closer together? How do we create a more awareness within the communities that the mines here, and this can help us in terms of sustaining our lifestyle in these communities, and we provide, like if you look at a lot of the remote communities that are there, and I mean, I grew up myself in a remote community, mining community in Timmins, and you always felt that unless you wanted to be physically a miner, you had to leave and go away. Where we as an industry, we provide a lot of opportunity for a lot of variety of different jobs and different skills. And if we all of a sudden people start to see that there's opportunity and then they can remain in these communities, and the economy can remain in these communities and prosper, and their kids can prosper. And I think these are the big things that we see coming out of the pandemic more. We've always been aligned with the communities, but now I think it's helping us to be more focused, aligned with the communities and the people.
What would your overriding message be to investors when they're looking at the gold mining sector and thinking, okay, is this a sector that I should have confidence to invest in from an ESG perspective?
Our industry, it's the safest heavy industry in the world in terms of environmental standards, in terms of how we deal with water, how we train and develop people, how we deal with the communities we work in. There's a very high standard, and I think the judge of it all, or maybe the big part of it is we live there too. So it's all sitting saying, if we're a community as a whole, and then from an ESG, you should be able to see us. The one thing that one challenge we have on ESG and and I had a discussion with some of the ESG firms who are doing the scorecards, and I said, what you need to do is don't just sit in a computer, look at a computer and sit in your office in Toronto or Melbourne. Come and see us. Do the same as what the banking analysts might do. Come every 6 months and visit our mines. Come in. Don't just read what we say. And go see what we do, and don't just talk to me. Talk to the people that work in the company. Talk to the hourly worker at the face, and get this thing. Are you getting the right message? And then you really get a sense of the core of our business. And I think if we start getting that type of standards happening, following in terms of what we talk about, the responsible gold mining principles, I think there can be a lot of more understanding of recognizing that we as an industry, we're the good guys, and that communities. I kind of look and say, it'd be nice if communities call you up and say, hey, can you build a mine by my town so that we can prosper?
Absolutely. Very much agree with that. Randy, a final word. What's the message to investors?
Well, look, it's the responsible gold mining principles and the commitment on the gold mining industry to set that as a minimum standard for our that should give confidence in terms of our ability to maintain, and I like capturing a lot of this into sort of one catch-all social license. It's our license to operate, and any successful business has to do a lot to maintain good, strong social license. It's a requirement of success. If you don't have social license, you will not be successful. So the industry is committed to it. The responsible gold mining principles. I'm not going to say it's a first step, because we've made many steps before this, but I think it is a necessary next step. And and I know that we're going to continue striving our way towards that.
We're going to leave it there. So thank you very much, Randy Smallwood, Tony Makuch. Really appreciate you joining me today. Thanks to everybody for joining us for this session. You heard it here. This is an industry that's very committed to responsible mining and is continuing to make a lot of progress in this area. Thank you.